Hi, y'all. It's Angela, and I'm back for another episode of Business Unveiled. And today you're in for a very special treat because everybody thinks about this topic, and some people feel comfortable talking about this topic, and some people don't feel comfortable talking about this topic. And so, one of my favorite sayings is get comfortable being uncomfortable. And so, today we're going to be talking about money and prices and raising prices. And we have a coach here, a business coach who's an expert in this. And so I want to welcome Katie Wussow to the show. Hi, Katie. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm super excited to talk about this because I know a lot of ladies are listening, and gentlemen, we love you too if you're out there listening. But for some reason, women have a really hard time with pricing in general and raising prices because they think that they're going to lose business. And so I have lots of thoughts around this. But before we even jump into talking about pricing and numbers, and it goes way deeper than that. But before you really became an expert in this and before you became a business coach, take us back and share with us, where did you grow up? What did you go to school for? And is that really what you're doing now?
Welcome to Business Unveiled, the podcast designed to help you thrive in the creative community. Here's your host, events and productivity consultant, Angela Profit.
What's up, GSD leaders? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Business Unveiled, where we share expert tips and secrets from top creative industry professionals. You know, we're going to take you behind the scenes of our experiences, share with you what we've learned from them, and how it's made us stronger. Because no one said it's easy owning a business, right? But it's a lot more fun when you've got a strong support team around you. And that's exactly what we do at GSD Creative. We're right there by your side. And I'm so excited that you've chosen this podcast to take the first step in growing a productive, profitable, and successful, wildly successful business within the hospitality and creative industry.
Today's episode is being brought to you by GSD Academy, where I personally walk you through my 4-step process with personalized videos. I give you downloadable templates and so many resources. So if you're serious about changing your life and your business and you're ready to GSD, that is get shit done, go to bit.ly/GSD Academy.
Yeah, there is a little bit of continuity between what I went to school for and what I'm doing now. But I am from Texas. I grew up in the Dallas area, and then I went to the University of Texas for college, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I just went to the business school because I said, you know what, if I don't really know what I want to do, then business is a pretty safe bet. I think I can get a job working at a business. But so I went to business school. I initially actually was a marketing major, but then I ended up changing to finance. And there's a whole backstory around that. But I went to school for finance. And then I was always really intrigued by the idea of being a consultant because I really like problem solving and working with teams. And I liked the idea of constantly working on new clients and new projects. And so I ended up getting a job as a consultant for sort of a niche firm doing financial and strategy consulting. And I did that for about 10 years. I worked for 5 years as a full-time employee with all the travel and all the accoutrements of being a full-time employee. And then when my first daughter was born, I went freelance for another 5 years and basically was a part-time contractor to my old job. And I loved what I was doing. I loved the people that I was working with. I loved being a consultant. I loved doing the strategy work and the financial work and all of that stuff. But my company, all of our clients were governmental entities. And no offense to governmental entities. I'm not anti-government.
Doesn't sound fun, though.
We need governmental entities, but they don't move fast.
Yeah.
And they often don't, we would get to the end of these projects and present our findings to the clients. And, oftentimes it would be, thank you very much for doing this work. And then the report, the 500-page report that I had written would sit on a shelf and nothing would happen. And so I hated that. I hated feeling like my work wasn't making any sort of impact.
Yeah.
So we actually moved to DC from Texas in 2017. And I thought, this is a good opportunity for me to cut ties with my previous employer and start getting my own clients, because I already had a freelance, I already had an LLC. I was already a freelancer, but I was still getting probably 90% of my income from my corporate clients. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to cut this off and see what I can do to get my own clients and to do work that does have an impact and that is more meaningful to me. And so that's when I started marketing myself as a consultant. And then I later started calling myself a coach, because that was really more kind of the work that I was doing was coaching versus consulting. And my very first client was a creative entrepreneur. Probably 3 or 4 out of the first 5 clients that I got when I started building my business were all creatives, and it just worked. The vibe that I had with those types of clients, it was just really good chemistry, and so that's when I decided to focus my entire business around using my financial and strategy expertise to come alongside creative entrepreneurs.
That's awesome. And so would you say, like, if you had to describe like your perfect client, it would be like a creative entrepreneur?
Oh, absolutely. It would be, my ideal client. My focus is an early stage creative entrepreneur. So service-based creative, somebody that's trying to get clients, somebody who's probably a solopreneur, or maybe they have like an assistant that they work with, but small business in the first 0 to 3 years of their business is really who I work with.
Gotcha. And then, I mean, as I'm a creative entrepreneur, so that's why I'm over here laughing. And so many of the people that I'm around, they're all creative entrepreneurs. And if they don't know what they don't know when it comes to their numbers and their pricing, and if we have a conversation, it's, it goes something like this. So how did you come up with your pricing? Well, I just checked what the other 2 or 3 people down the road were doing. Yeah. And it's like, that is not the right way to do it.
I went into a Facebook group and I polled people that I don't know and have never met in my life and asked what they were charging. And that's what I charge now.
It's crazy. And so, but I didn't know any different, right? Until I had a mentor who taught me, he's like, no, that's not what you do. You figure out your experience and what you're worth and your time and your expenses and your overhead and your goals and where you want to go. And so I guess my first question really is like, why are so many people, especially women, why are they undercharging? Like, is it really about the competitive edge, or is it just they're not educated? Because I wasn't educated. I don't mean that in a harsh way. It's just I didn't know what I didn't know. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think to our previous point of going and asking your friends what they charge, or going into a Facebook group and asking what they charge, you have to start somewhere, right? And everybody has to, just got to put a number on it and move forward and figure out where you need to adjust later. And so if that's where you have been, where the listeners have been, that's okay. But we don't want to stay there forever, where our pricing is sort of random, hodgepodge, or based on somebody else's business and not your business. But I think there are a lot of different reasons why people undercharge. It's a very multifaceted problem. I am not immune to this. When I first started, I started my freelance practice, I guess that was in 2011. And, most of my work came from my corporate job, but I still kind of dipped my toe into the water of getting my own clients. And while I was working and freelancing for my corporate job, my corporate boss was billing my time out at $125 an hour. And I turned around and charged my freelance clients that I brought in the door $25 an hour. So this is certainly not something that I have I've always been great at in my own business. And I think part of that is the imposter syndrome thing, just general lack of confidence, general lack of understanding of what our work is really worth in the marketplace. So all of those things come into play. But the two biggest factors that I have personally observed as a coach and why people are undercharging is, one, you're charging based on the time you're spending versus the value that you're creating. So you might say, it doesn't take me much time to create this logo, or it doesn't take me any time at all to style someone's wardrobe or to plan this photo shoot. It's so easy for me. So I can't charge a lot of money for it. And what we forget is that the things that we are really good at, the things that we are best at in the world, are things that we can probably do pretty quickly and without a lot of effort. And so we end up charging based on how it feels for us to do the work and how much time we have to spend doing the work, instead of charging based on the value and the impact we're creating for that client. So for example, I don't know if any of you have used a CPA to file your taxes at the end of the year, but they charge a lot of money, $500, $600, $700, $800 to file a tax return. That probably takes them, at least in my case, like 20 minutes to do. But that's because they're really good at it. They're really experienced. They've put in time and energy and effort and education to get good at that skill. And so our work is no different. Something that you can do quickly and easily and almost effortlessly, it doesn't mean that that's less valuable. It might mean it's actually more valuable, and you need to be charging more for it. So that's one huge kind of paradigm shift that people need to make, is thinking that, well, because this is easy and not very time consuming, it should be cheap. And the other thing that I've really observed as a coach is, I think probably the biggest factor, and it's the fear of losing business. Because I think people, they take their pricing out into the world, they get on discovery calls with prospective clients, and they say, this is what it costs to work with me. And then you always have people, right, that say, I just don't have the money right now. It's out of my budget. I can't afford it. Your rates are too high. This person over here charges less. And so we've had that experience of someone telling us, I can't work with you because of money. And so that creates this fear that if it's this hard to sell my work at this price, how much harder is it going to be to find clients that are willing to pay 20%, 30%, even 50% more? So I think it's that fear of, I'm already struggling to get the clients that I really need. Raising rates is going to make it worse. And I think that's probably one of the biggest factors that holds people back from charging what they really know they should be charging.
So how do you know, like, when is it a good time to know to raise your prices?
Well, I mean, I think it can be as simple. A lot of times we overcomplicate things in business, right?
Right.
But a lot of times it can be as simple as, is my business making enough money? Is my business profitable? Am I able to pay myself a consistent income? And if the answer is no, then you have two options. You either need to get more clients, or you need to get more money from the clients that you have. And it really can be that simple. I worked with a client a couple of years ago, and she came to me, and I always ask people, like, why did you reach out to a coach? And she said, I am working as many hours as I used to work in my full-time job, in my 9-to-5 traditional job, but I'm still not making enough money to pay my personal expenses. So there's a disconnect between the rates that I'm charging and the money that I actually need to live. And so it really can be as simple as, if you are not making enough money, you have to figure out how to generate the income that you need from the clients that you're getting.
Well, and something that really changed my life that a business mentor helped me with is, we were doing, and I know for our listeners that have listened to me for a long time, they've probably heard this story like 100 times, but like, we were doing over 250 weddings in a year, which is crazy. Whoa. And I just kept saying yes, and I kept hiring more people to help. And I just wanted to help. And really, it had nothing to do with money. And I didn't know how to run a business. I don't know what I was doing. I just knew that I was helping people and, making a lot of girls happy and brides happy by making all their, their dreams come true, as cheesy as it sounds. But I about died that year. Like, I was so unhealthy, and it was just, I never slept. It was not healthy at all. And so, that's where I had like 3 packages and people would pick. And then I got this new mentor, and he was like, how do you make money? Like, you're just run ragged. Like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, no one's ever asked me that before. I don't know. I have to think about it. I'll get back to you. And then he's like, okay, explain to me what you're doing. And I'm like, you're not going to understand. In my head, I'm like, you're like a 60-year-old dude. Like, you don't get it. But what I didn't get it. Like, I didn't get that I needed a business plan where I went through and shared with him everything that we were doing. And he's like, well, why are you not doing the design? You have the experience. You have the eye for it. Why are you not charging separately for all of the experience that you have? And planning and logistics is something totally different than design. And I mean, this was back when, wedding planners were not essential. It was still a luxury, and people didn't hire designers. Like, this was before Pinterest. And so I'm like, this is going to be a really hard sell, but he mapped it all out for me. He's like, we're going to split this apart. You can keep up with your time, and you can charge for hourly. We ended up selling in time blocks, and then you can charge a percentage for design. And again, I was so uncomfortable when I first started it. And I'm like, I don't really know. And, it is like a confidence level thing. And so when I first pitched the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 people, they're like, no, that's too much. And I cried, and I'm like, because my closing rate was like 100%. But then the 5th person said, okay, this sounds good. And then the 6th person said, okay. And so it took us 2 years to get out of all of those weddings that we had said yes to, that we had no business doing, because we weren't doing full service. And then we took it all to full service, and we were able to get it down to 30 a year, but from 250, but 30 full service weddings where we did all the design, we did all the planning, we controlled the entire experience, and the outcome was so much better, not only for the client, but for my profitability as a business owner. And so when people are like, how did you go from doing 250 to 30? I'm like, well, you have to assess your time, your experience, your numbers. And it wasn't my idea. It was a coach's idea. But it was hard to get there, and you're going to have people say no. So what are some of the like consequences of people like, we all make mistakes. Like, there's no easy way to say it. I don't like to use the word mistakes. I like to say opportunities. Like, it was an opportunity for me to learn that I didn't need to be taking this many events to make X amount of profit. There was money always in the bank, but I didn't realize like I really wasn't making a profit. So just in your experience of helping your clients with this, like, what are some like short-term and long-term mistakes that you have seen where people don't raise their prices?
Yeah, I mean, to the first question of the consequences of continuing to undercharge, I think your story is a powerful example of when you take that approach of, I'm going to say yes to everything. I'm going to have, 13 different packages that people can choose from. Multiply that out, and your business was large. You were doing a lot of business, but you're unprofitable, you're stressed, you're spread too thin, and it can have really devastating consequences to your personal life and to your business. Like, whether your business grows or whether it doesn't grow, at those lower price points, it will still really struggle with profitability. And that you bring up another important point of how do you know when you need to raise your prices? If you have a 100% closing rate and nobody ever says no, then your prices are probably too low, and you could probably stand to bump those babies up. But some really common mistakes that I see people making around this topic. And again, I'm like you, like mistakes are how we learn in business. So there's no shame in making a mistake. It's just an opportunity to do things better the next time. But the overarching theme is that people think the price is what drives the sale. That closing the sale depends on picking the right price, because again, we have had that experience of somebody saying, no, I can't really afford that, or that's too expensive. And so what we do is we figure out ways to lower our prices. We have like 4 or 5 different tiers of service so that we can meet we feel like we're doing people this big favor because we can work with all budgets, right? So we make these miniaturized versions of what we do, these smaller packages, and we come up with ways to meet people where they are price wise. When what we really need to do is figure out, was that the right client for me in the first place? So did that client say no because they really aren't the best fit? Like they don't really stand to get a lot of value out of working with me? Or is there something that I can do better in my sales process to convey the value of what I'm doing? So we internalize this pricing feedback that we get and make it that the price was wrong and we need to change our pricing, when really most of the time that's not actually what that's telling you. It's telling you that either your lead wasn't the right lead, or that you can do something better on the sales side to improve your conversions and improve your closing rate. And so I think the biggest mistake that people make is internalizing pricing feedback into the wrong part of the business. Like you should always internalize the feedback that people are giving you, but you might be misinterpreting those signals quite significantly.
So what are do you have any I remember when I was taking like a speech class, there was a guy there who was like, here's some stealth closes that no matter how much you charge, that these men are funny, like no matter what your fee is. And he's like, there's some people that charge $10,000 an hour, and there's some stealth closes that you can use no matter what you're going to close these people. It doesn't matter what you charge. Like, do you have any feedback towards that at all with like these stealth closes?
Man, I wish I did. That would be really nice. But I think that when you're talking about selling, and when you're talking about selling, a premium priced service, because if you're talking about raising your rates, like you're probably getting into what we might call premium pricing. And I think the biggest shift that is helpful for this when it comes to selling is to focus on the result or the outcome that the client is going to get, instead of what we tend to do, which is focus on like the deliverables. Like you're going to get this many images, or you're going to get this many sessions, coaching sessions, or you're going to get access to this online training portal. Or we tend to focus on, here's all the stuff that I'm going to give you. Or we're focusing on, here's why I'm so great, and let me prove to you why I'm so great, instead of focusing on that client and what they want, what are the outcomes that they want to achieve, and demonstrating that you can help them get those outcomes. And so just making that simple shift in your discovery calls, or however you conduct your sales process, of focusing on showing that you can help the client get what they want, it has an astronomical effect on your ability to sell, because it also takes the pressure off of you, right? Because selling then becomes talking about the client and not talking about yourself.
What are your thoughts on having someone else in the company completely handle the pricing? So like, I know with me, like it's not the fun part. Like, I'm not a numbers girl. It's not the fun part for me. I just want to talk about how we can do this strategy and build these ads, or like build this event. And, then they're like, well, how much does all that cost? I'm like, oh, you'll have to talk to somebody else. Like, there's a numbers girl in the company that, helps with all that. Do you think there's value to having someone else do pricing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always helpful to have somebody to be able to operate in your strengths, especially when you have a team. There's all these outsourced CEO firms or financial advisors that you can work with. There are ways, even if you don't have an internal team, there are ways to get support in this area. You can work with a coach, work with a consultant, have somebody look at your pricing. There's all these things that you can do, but you can't outsource understanding it. Right? You can outsource figuring it out. You can have people help you with it. You can meet with a financial advisor on a regular basis. You can do all those things. And I think if you have the opportunity to do that, you definitely should. But at the end of the day, it is your business, and you need to understand in at least big picture terms how your numbers work, how your business turns a profit, what your expenses are, and how that translates to the day-to-day decisions that you are making in your business. That is not something that you can outsource. You cannot, I can't remember who said this, but you can't delegate your accountabilities. Like you can't delegate away, away the things that you are ultimately accountable for. And so, but absolutely get some help, get some support, get a team member, get an advisor, get a mentor, get someone who can support you and strengthen your ability to understand your numbers. But at the end of the day, you have to understand it yourself.
Yeah. So what is your advice for people that are listening that, and I know we've gone through this too, where we look at our numbers and our prices every single year. And what do we need to move? What do we need to shift? Where do we need to go? I mean, just when you're looking at your numbers. And so, we have ongoing clients. And so some people, if we're like, oh, we have a price increase because of blah, blah, blah. And because of COVID, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, you're going to have a price increase, because some of the hospitality groups we work with, they might run June to June. And, things have been crazy in the hospitality industry. And so they're putting out new menus and the prices are different and they're more. And what these clients aren't understanding, which I kind of get it, but not really, because I'm not a chef, I'm not a cook, I don't buy the produce, but I've noticed like meat's more expensive, groceries are more expensive. So what do you have any advice for people when they have clients that are ongoing and then they have a pricing menu of services from last year, and then they're raising their prices and they push back? What are some things that they can say to these clients that push back?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, if you are in that position where you have ongoing clients, you should be proactive in communicating when you revisit your rates. And so it's probably in your contract somewhere that you can adjust your rates on a certain sort of time frame. But I think it's always a good idea to be proactive and transparent about why your prices are increasing. So before you put the revised pricing out into the world, get prepared with some of the reasons and the drivers that are behind those increases, and just kind of assume that people are intelligent and reasonable and are going to understand, and if people say, you're raising these prices, this is, what's behind this, I don't understand, to be able to share that information in a really transparent, in it's as transparent of a way as you can justify as a business owner, I think is really the only way to go about it. There are probably people out there that are more versed in customer relations or public relations that could put a nice shiny bow on top of that. But at the end of the day, I think it's about, conducting yourself with integrity and being honest and clear and transparent about what's going on in your business, and then being prepared to stand and defend the decisions that you've made, knowing that people might be upset. This is especially in the time of COVID. It's a stressful time. A lot of people are experiencing all manner of suffering and struggling. And so, sometimes the decision you make as a business owner is going to make people upset, and just being prepared for that.
And stick to your guns. Like, it's really easy for me to say, well, this isn't a good fit anymore, or no, that's not going to work. I hate saying the word no, but if it's not going to work and if it's going to be costing me money rather than making the business profitable, then it doesn't make sense anymore. So sometimes like it's okay. Like it's okay. You can't please everybody.
Yeah. And
And
knowing too, I think knowing what happens if you cave. So I worked with a client several years ago that really, like, she knew what her pricing was supposed to be, but she had a really hard time with making the words come out of her mouth, of like saying like, I charge this. And so what we did is we put together a spreadsheet of all of her business's expenses. I'm sure most of your listeners have something like this in their business of, this is what it costs to run my business. This is how much I need to pay myself. This is how much I need to be setting aside for taxes. And then we did some scenarios of like, okay, if you continue to charge 20 to 30% less than you're supposed to be charging, we looked at the impact. She knew that means like, I'm not going to be able to pay myself my salary, or I'm not going to be able to make these investments, or I'm not going to be able to pay for this team member. And so I think it's important to know the ramifications of not sticking to your guns, and know this is going to mean that I can't pay my team. This is going to mean that I can't pay my rent. This is going to mean that I'm not able to do these strategic projects that I want to do. Is super helpful.
are there any like strategies or like advices, like your top 4 things that you can avoid making pricing mistakes that you can share with our listeners?
I don't know if I can whittle it down to the top 4. There are many that
or
are
tell
coming
us your
to
top 10.
Yeah. So basing your prices on somebody else's business is don't do that. Basing your pricing on the people that don't want to work with you. So trying to please the person that is giving you a hard time versus pricing for your absolute ideal client in mind. That's a big mistake. Pricing based on how you feel about your work, based on versus actual numbers, is a big mistake. The other paradigm shift that's really helpful for people is, I think that oftentimes we start the whole conversation by asking the wrong question. So we start the conversation by asking, what would people be willing to pay for, XYZ thing, instead of looking at what your goals are, like having a number in mind of how much money you need to make in a month, and asking yourself, how many clients can I work with in a month? And then you have a rough idea of what you should be charging. And then the question becomes, what would I need to provide in order to justify this price? So how can I create an experience and a process for my clients that makes this price make sense? So I'm actually in the middle of a rebrand right now for my business. I'm doing a rebrand and a new website. And I am paying, like, I think I calculated 5 times as much as I paid for the first website that I got in my business. Because this process includes so much value. It includes the copywriting, it includes the design, it includes the SEO, it includes a launch strategy, it includes a brand identity, a visual brand identity for my business. It includes all of the things that I need to make this a really, really successful project. And so I think that's a huge paradigm shift that people need to make, and shift away from, well, how much would people be willing to pay for, wedding planning or a newborn photography session? And instead ask the question, I need to charge this much. How can I make that make sense for my ideal client? Is a huge one.
So what I'm hearing too is like, and again, I've learned this the hard way, is it's good to try to plan ahead for like how many clients you want and what they're going to pay, right? So
absolutely.
So you don't say, yeah, y'all don't do what I did. Like I didn't play. And I didn't understand. And like, I was the girl where I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is me talking to my business mentor. And I'm like, I never know how many people I'm going to get. And he's like, well, how about you set monthly goals? And then once you have 3 people book, then you say no, or we're booked, or you know that you don't need to take on anymore because you've already met those goals and those payment amounts. So you know that you're going to be able to pay your people and pay yourself and do all. And I was like, oh, when I was telling him, like, you don't understand, he's like, no, Angela, you don't understand.
Yeah.
I really didn't. So plan ahead, like whiteboard it out. I don't like paper and I don't like to use paper, but this is something where I'm like, put a bunch of paper up if you don't have a whiteboard or idea paint, and like just ideas away at like what clients you want, how many you want a month, how much they need to pay per month, and plan ahead. And it's crazy when you ask the universe for something, it actually will come back to you if you say it out loud enough and if you keep like believing in yourself. I know it sounds so freaking cheesy, but it's so true. I don't know. I feel that way.
Yeah. I think setting your intention is really powerful. And yeah, I mean, other businesses operate like this too, right? Like if you call a hotel and all of their rooms are booked, they're not like, oh, I felt really bad, so I'm going to let this person sleep in the hallway or in the in the laundry room or in the ice machine room. You know, they're full. And even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes because we're just selling our time, you do have a capacity. You have a maximum number of hours that you can work in a given week and month. And so understanding what your capacity is and how many clients that allows you to serve is so important, because you really can't do your pricing without that. You have to know how much capacity you have and then how you're going to divvy up that capacity to your different clients in order to generate revenue. And so I think that's a really, really good point, that planning is really important. And when you do, you say the magic word of no, or even not yet, that's when you can start doing cool stuff like booking out in advance, because you've said, you know what, I've hit my limit for June. Let's look into July. Let's look into August. And so I think that's a really, really good shift that your listeners can make if they've just kind of been in a spot of saying yes to everything because they think they have to.
Yeah, I mean, recently we even had this happened to me twice last week and it was two totally different businesses where I had scheduled like a complimentary Zoom call to talk about some things, and these people reached out completely separately, and they're like, hey, do you have any more time? Like, can we move it up? I really need this right now, right? Like, so pushy. And I'm just like, we live by our calendar and we block our time. Like once a client books us, we go through our calendar and do time chunks and time blocks. And like, yeah, I mean, we can be flexible, but like that messes up our entire workflow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not fair. It's kind of like first come, first serve, get in line. Like, I don't mean to sound rude. But when I read those emails, I'm just like, gosh, do I even want to work with you? I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, get in my head, I'm kind of like, get in line. But there's like warnings that I've learned, kind of like pre-qualifications of people where I'm like, okay, this isn't going to be a good client, because if they think, I want all of my clients to feel as though they are my only client. I would love that. I love when people feel that way. But in reality, that's not reality. So do you have any way to or like any feedback or encouragement for people that have potential clients that are super pushy? Like, do you think they should move forward or just like, I was kind of at a loss of words. I was kind of like, no, my calendar hasn't changed. If we can't offer you any other options, like, because then if I did move it, then they're going to get used to that, and we've started off the relationship where they're controlling it, and it's like, no, we're not doing that. So what are your thoughts on that? Pushy people.
I know. And I think I love asking people this question because after you've been in business for like 3, 4, 5 years or longer, you develop your own sort of internal red flag system. I interviewed somebody on my podcast, a former client on my podcast a few weeks ago, and she is an interior designer, and she said one of her red flags is when somebody, a prospective client for interior design, talks about wanting to work with a designer because they're going to get better deals. That has become a red flag for her, because that's not really why you work with a designer. She's not a walking coupon. She sometimes can get you good pricing on wholesale furniture, but other times that's not really how it works out. So I think you have to a little bit develop your own sort of spidey sense about what types of people are going to work well for you versus not. But the one thing that I think is true for everybody's business is you have a process. If you don't have a process in place, you should have a process, but you have a process in place for your sales process. Like, you have to probably send people a scheduling link so that they can set up a time to talk to you. They have to sign a contract. They have to pay an invoice. They have to go through a series of steps in order to start working with you. If they cannot go through a simple series of steps to get the project started, if they can't pay an invoice on time, if they can't respond to an email, if they can't work a scheduling tool, if they can't show up for a discovery call on time, if they can't do those things, they're probably not going to be great clients to work with. And so I think you have to observe how a client conducts themselves before you've even started working with them. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing you have to remember too, nobody likes saying no to people. I mean, I am not immune to feeling super guilty for saying, you know what, this isn't going to work for me. But you have to remember, especially when you're talking about wedding planning, interior design, some of these creative crafts, the projects are really long.
Yeah.
And so if you get into a situation where you're working with a client that is a bad fit, you're going to be miserable for like potentially a year, even longer. Yeah.
Yes.
And so you have to keep that in mind and just realize that sometimes, your sanity and your team's sanity is worth preserving and losing a few $1,000s.
There has come a point where I remember one year we took on this huge Halloween party project, and it was, in the beginning, it was so fun and we were so excited. And then the client was such a mess, like, bless their hearts. And, it was just such a mess. And I'm like, there is no amount of money that can ever come our way to work another event for this client. Like, there's no way. And so, sometimes you just have to hold your tongue, which the older I get, the harder it is to do. Yeah. And this was years ago. So if this happened now, I probably would be able to sniff it out, or I just would have said, you know what, we're done here. We're not going to deal with your mouth and your rudeness and your narcissism.
Yeah.
And but my team was like, this, like, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. But then the next year they called back to see, were we available? And I'm like, no, we're not available on that date. We're booked. I don't really think we were. And then they're like, well, what about this date? I'm like, nope, we're booked on that day too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it doesn't matter what day you say, like, my team would never go back and work for you because you were so rude to them. And like, the two clients, like, they were like respectful and nice to me. But like, if you're rude to my team, that's a direct reflection. And like, I'm not going to put up with that.
Yeah.
And so it's really difficult sometimes. And so again, it's like, no matter how broke we were at the time, I'm like, nope, we're booked. We're booked.
Yeah. And it goes back, like, you have to develop your own gut sense and intuition about this stuff. And I think the more I talk to different business owners, my sister-in-law is a business owner. She owns a children's theater. And so she's interacting with parents, parents of youth all the time, day in and day out. And
I don't know how she does it.
Yeah. Really, she just, this is her field. And so she sent me a text the other day, and she was like, somebody just emailed me to say that they were pulling their kid out of my theater, and I didn't even care. I was just like, good luck, best of luck to you. I hope you find a place where your child can really, enjoy theater. Like, she's like, I just, 3 years ago, that would have ruined my whole day.
Yeah.
And so I think there's part of this that is just gained with experience, your ability to deal with people, your ability to know the right way to handle different situations, how to deal with difficult situations, just comes with time and experience.
I have never experienced anything like child theater. Like last year, my sister's, or one of my nieces, she's gotten really into plays and theater. And so if you tell this story to your sister, she would laugh her ass off because it's like these kids are amazing. Like they did Beauty and the Beast, and this was like the first like real little acting school outside of like the school play.
Uh-huh.
And so I go, and we have front row seats, and it's great. And I was so impressed. I'm like, damn, these kids work hard and they're so good. And so then at the very end, my little niece comes over, and they school hop. So they go to like all these different little acting schools. So it's like they don't have like a brick and mortar.
Uh-huh.
And so they come in with a U-Haul and set all this stuff up, and then, get the U-Haul loaded and then go somewhere else. And so we're like, all the parents are like helping clean up and like get all the stuff in the U-Haul. And my niece goes, Mama, so she's like, Miss so-and-so is going to bring me home because everyone told me that if I help clean up, I'll get a better part in the next play. And I wanted to choke her. Like, I wanted to crawl under like chairs that didn't exist. And I went over and I'm like, Caroline, sit down on the stage, please. And I'm like very quiet. I'm like, I don't know who told you that, but don't ever say anything like that out loud again. That is super embarrassing, and we'll talk about this later. And I think my sister would, like, she didn't even know what to say. She was so embarrassed. And so, but that is how it is with some of these kids and their parents. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like these parents are it's so political. And like, I don't even know, my sister was telling me like how some of these acting moms, it's like as bad as like the pageant moms. And like, I grew up around all that, but like my mom never acted like that. She would ever. I just, it's a whole nother little business there.
It's a whole thing, man.
I'm like, I think
my sister-in-law has a really good group of parents, but
thank God.
I think that's also why she was not sad to see this particular customer go a different direction. She was like, you know what, this isn't worth it. There's some things that are more important than, money.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like this one bad toxicity of a parent that's like brewing all of this drama. And I'm like, I am 40 years old. Like, is it really happening? Like, these people are as old or older than me. And I'm like, damn, they never grow out of it.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter what industry you're in. We all deal with these things. So it's crazy. So my last big question is, what advice do you have for people that they're ready to just like completely, they know they need to raise their prices. They know they're done with the mistakes, especially coming out of COVID. And you know what? Some businesses may need to raise their prices to stay alive right now because of COVID. What are some things that you can tell them that, I would be like, stay strong, you can do it. But I'm sure there's like more tactical things where, it's like ditch your pricing mistakes and like, let's start a new fresh season to make sure you're profitable. Like, what do they need to do? Like, what's the first step?
Yeah, I think this is a really good, COVID. I'm not one of those people that's like, look at all these opportunities COVID is bringing us. Like, this is This is a hard time for
Yeah.
business owners. This is not like the best time in the world to be a small business owner. This is challenging.
Yeah.
But one thing that you can do in this time of transition is reevaluate what you're offering. So, is everything that you are offering on your price list and on your packages list, are you thrilled when you book those things? And anything that you're not actually excited to book, just get rid of it and streamline down to the things that are really working for you. So that's the first thing. And then recognize that the person that is the ideal client for that offer, for your streamlined offers, they have an outcome that you can get for them. They have a problem that you can solve for them. And just to remember that people are always willing to pay money to have their problems solved.
Amen.
Always willing to pay money to have their problem solved. Our refrigerator went out during quarantine.
Oh,
You
God.
better believe that I was willing to pay money to have somebody haul that old refrigerator away. I had a problem and they solved it, and I was happy to pay them. And your work is a lot more exciting than hauling refrigerators, but we have to stop pricing our work like oh, I'm just going to do you this favor, or I just want to give you a deal because that makes me feel good, because people don't want your favors. They want your absolute best work. And so create pricing around those streamlined offers that reflects the best work that you can possibly do, and then go do that.
And one more thing that I'll add to that is, like, we've done some coaching for some other planners, wedding planners before, and it's almost like they're so salty and angry and pissed off that somebody is paying XYZ. And I'm like, why are you pissed off? You're the one that told them that's what you charge.
Right.
Like, and they're like, God, they need to be paying more. I'm like, then you're starting. And like you said at the very beginning of this, you don't know these pain points until you're about 3 to 5 years in, where you're really in it. And you're like, okay, this isn't going to work anymore. This doesn't make me happy. This makes me angry. This, like you said, if you're dreading something with a client, then evaluate, why are you dreading it? So I love that. I love that. This was so helpful. And I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but we're out of time. And so if people want to touch base with you or get coaching from you specifically on this, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. So I have a resource on this that might be helpful to some of the listeners. So it's a free mini course on pricing. So if you want to raise prices without losing business, it's just a free mini course that walks you step by step through that process and through a lot of the things that we've talked about today. And you can access that. You can go to programs.katiewussow.com/pricing.
Okay.
And get access to that.
We'll put it in the show notes too. Thank you so much. That'll be super helpful.
Oh, my pleasure. And then to follow me, in general, I hang out on Instagram. That's where I spend time. I'm at Katie Wussow on Instagram. And then I have a business podcast called The Game Changer. And so if you search The Game Changer with Katie Wussow anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find that.
Yeah, y'all go over and listen to The Game Changer and make sure you're a subscriber. And then I know that you, do you check all your DMs on Instagram?
Oh, I'm a big DMer. Yeah, DM me. I spend a lot of time in the DMs. I love chatting with people in the DMs.
I'm trying to do better. It's like every day I try to I'm like, okay, I'll check everything once a day. And then it's like, okay, I'll do it in the morning and do it at night.
Yeah.
I've gotten a little bit better since quarantine, but now that things are picking back up, it's like, I've got to put it on my calendar.
Totally. And this one thing, I have a relatively small audience, and so it's still pretty manageable, but at some point it may not be, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, I should grow. And then thank you so much. Y'all go over and check out the free mini course on pricing, especially if you want to raise your prices. And like I said, I'll put it in the show notes so that you guys can just click on programs.katiewussow.com/pricing, sign up, take a listen to the Game Changer podcast. Make sure you subscribe, and then make sure that you go over to Instagram. And earlier I was like, are you on Facebook too? And she's like, yeah, but not super present. I'm like, yeah, we post, but we're not super present there
Right.
either. It seems like Instagram has taken over. And then now with quarantining, like we've gotten into TikTok, which has actually been really fun. So are you on TikTok?
I have resisted it, but I watch all the TikToks that people post on Instagram.
Yes.
And they're pretty fun. So I might
They
just have to figure out
are.
what that looks like.
But you know what too? Like if I follow the marketing hashtag, and so like there's some really fun things that you could do with like pricing tips, with like some of the fun songs, and people, they actually like pay attention more, I feel like. And
yeah, it's a
then-
less crowded platform probably, which presents a lot of opportunities when it's just building up.
Yeah, it's really fun. But thank you so much for your time today. And everyone listening, thank you so, so much for listening. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Business Unveiled. Everybody have a great day. Bye.
Now that you have all the tools you need to conquer the world in GSD, just share this with your friends and your fellow GSD leaders. And be sure you're a subscriber so you never miss the juicy details of Business Unveiled. And you can ask Siri to listen to the latest episode, but you got to be a subscriber. Before I go, I have a huge favor to ask, and it would mean the world to me. While you're listening, snap a quick screenshot, post it to your Instagram story, tag me at GSD leader_, and share with me your top takeaway from this episode and how it relates to you. Until next time, remember, stay productive and profitable.
You've been listening to Business Unveiled with Angela Profit. Join us next time as we share our experiences to help you be more productive and profitable in your creative business. For more great resources, visit angelaprofit.com.